According to theconversation.com, in teens, the secretion of the sleep hormone melatonin begins at about 10:45 p.m. and continues until about 8 a.m., what this means is that teenagers are unable to fall asleep until melatonin secretion begins, and they are also not able to awake until the melatonin secretion stops at 8 a.m. According to the National Sleep Foundation, the sleep requirement for teenagers is between 8 to 10 hours per night. That indicates that the earliest healthy wake-up time for teens should not be before 7 a.m. The lack of energy could result in a bad test score, let alone having a bad day. This bad test score that helps us getting accepted into college or receive certain scholarship money could just be a result of a bad day. Yes, you can retest, but that costs money and is not the bigger picture. This test can't measure how loyal a person is, or how determined they are in what they do, what their work ethic is, and how well they work with others. It only tests them on how simple things that most people won't truly need in an everyday job. The test needs to explore the creativeness that a person has, or the curiosity that a person could bring and offer in a tough situation at work. There's so much more to a person than what a standardized test assesses. So how do we fix the problem? What's the solution? What's a better way we can test a student's knowledge? Performance-based assessments. This testing method can eliminate the issues with standardized testing. Issues like the cost and the anxiety that the students feel when taking the test. This method gathers varied data over a course of a year or a school year. This method is more accountable in the idea that they are being tested on what they are learning in the classroom rather than what they are learning in their test preparation class. Standardized testing is a problem. This is worth the time to figure out a solution. We are stressing students out and leading to anxiety, leading to the fear of being rejected, because that is the thought that is put into our heads when we think of standardized testing. Basing students' intelligence off of a standardized test does a poor job preparing them for the real world and brings the educational system to its knees, forcing it to teach to the test rather than provide students with wisdom and skills necessary to be successful in life.
One of the biggest problems that arises from standardized tests is the fact that a lot of the questions are, frankly, nonsense and don't have a clear or a right answer. People are being confronted with opinion questions that may have multiple possible answers, but only one right one. The year is 2012. New York State's Education Commissioner makes the call to not count a question against students who got it wrong because it confused so many kids and teachers alike. We all know that story about a tortoise who challenged a hare to a race, right? A standardized test given to 8th grade students in New York had a similar story, but instead of a tortoise, a talking pineapple challenges a rabbit to a race. The animals in the forest are confused because fruit, talking or otherwise, cannot run. A crow suggests that perhaps the pineapple has a trick up his sleeve and is trying to fool them all. An owl responds, "Pineapples do not have sleeves." Obviously, the hare wins the race because the fruit never budged from the starting line. To end this narrative, all of the animals in the forest eat the talking pineapple. The very last sentence of this story was, "Moral of the story, pineapples do not have sleeves." While this fact is common sense, the questions themselves did not make any sense, and no one could figure it out. Multiple questions were completely discounted from the test because so many people answered them incorrectly. And there are more than one occasion of practically unanswerable questions on these tests. author Sarah Holbrook had 2 of her poems on a couple of Texas's assessments of academic readiness. A question about her poem Midnight read, "Dividing the poem into 2 stanzas allows the poet to," followed by 4 very technical answers, assuming she was comparing and contrasting 2 stanzas. When a teacher emailed her to ask her what the correct answer really was, she realized that she didn't have a clue. In reality, she put a break between her stanzas because it sounded better when she read them out loud. Simple as that, but no one ever bothered to ask any of the authors what the answers really were, so these tests contained made-up questions with inaccurate answers. How are these tests accurately measuring the intelligence levels of your average student? Only the most clinical and logical thinkers are able to answer these questions. Those of us who are more creative or artistic-minded will struggle and therefore fail, because we lack the ability to critically examine questions without actual answers. According to late education researcher Gerald W. Bracey, PhD, qualities that standardized tests cannot measure include creativity, critical thinking, resilience, motivation, persistence, curiosity, endurance, reliability, enthusiasm, empathy, self-awareness, self-discipline, leadership, civic-mindedness, courage, compassion, resourcefulness, sense of beauty, sense of wonder, honesty, and integrity. These tests are measuring a student's ability to memorize formulas and techniques, not their ability to perform in a workplace or interact with other people, things that would actually be necessary in everyone's future. According to education researcher Gregory J. Cizik, anecdotes abound illustrating how testing produces gripping anxiety in even the brightest students and makes young children vomit or cry or both. On March 14, 2002, the Sacramento Bee reported that test-related jitters, especially among young students, are so common that the Stanford 9 exam comes with instructions on what to do with a test booklet in the case that a student vomits on it. There are cases of children as young as 10 years old suffering from actual mental breakdowns due to the stress caused by the knowledge that these tests that they are taking will determine whether or not they get into those advanced classes the following year. Not to mention, how well a student does on these tests directly affects their teachers and their schools. If students do poorly, teachers can have their wages cut or even be fired. And the final problematic thing about standardized tests is the inconsistency between the tests. Every state has a different test, meaning that if a student in California has easier math questions than I do, that student will get a higher score than me, therefore taking my spot at the college of my dreams. All of these problems can be solved, however, by implementing other forms of gathering data on students to more accurately assess their abilities and their intelligence levels.
The reliance on standardized testing in today's education system has reached such a toxic level that education is no longer, as Save the Children put it, the road that children follow to reach their full potential in life, but now is catered towards getting more bubbles filled in on a paper than your peers. As Mackenzie just explained to you, standardized testing is a broken system that doesn't accurately assess knowledge and has led to mental and emotional health risks in today's youth. So the real question is, who in their right minds still thinks standardized testing is a good idea? In order to return to the core values of education, standardized testing must be eliminated from the school environment. And while it would be great to stop right there and just think, oh, problem solved, no more tests, I think we can all agree that this would not very much would be accomplished in this manner. There is still the necessity to evaluate a student's intelligence. So what is the solution? The answer to that question is that there is no single solution. Just as it is a ridiculous notion to determine a student's success off of one test on one day for the rest of their life, it would be just as ridiculous to think that another solution would solve the problem. The best present solution to the current education crisis would be to implement multiple measures that would assess a student on problems with real-world applications, including performance-based assessments and portfolios, which would provide a more well-rounded insight to a student in their educational career. Performance-based assessments are a more open-ended way of gauging a student's knowledge and can test them on pertinent information and allows them to flex their imagination, creativity, resourcefulness, critical thinking skills. Project Appleseed defines performance assessment as testing that requires a student to create an answer or a product that demonstrates his or her knowledge or skills. Examples of these assessments include group projects focused on collaboration, essays, scientific experiments and projects, and demonstrations of knowledge, including oral presentations. Performance assessments do a better job of determining if a student can use their knowledge they've learned, which is no doubt much more important than how well they can memorize information, like standardized tests. According to the Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development, performance assessments can evaluate content knowledge, higher order thinking or processing skills, work habits, and time management. However, performance assessments do come with their downfalls. For instance, a student could be having a bad day or didn't get enough sleep the night before, and they may not perform very well on an experiment or presentation. This is why the inclusion of portfolios can provide better understanding of the student themselves. Providing universities and other post-education places with portfolios eliminates the issue of catering to classes, reduces stress in students, and provides a better insight to a student's work ethic and motivation. Dr. Julia Sherba de Valenzuela defines a portfolio as a systematic collection of student work and related materials that depicts a student's activities, accomplishments, and achievements. Basically, a portfolio is a bunch of a student's best homework, projects, presentations, etc., gathered together to showcase the work they've done over the course of a career or just a class. The portfolio has many advantages over the standardized test. Unlike tests that ask ridiculous questions about pineapples with sleeves, portfolios represent the student in their own learning environment, meaning that they would be judged off of the content they are actually learning. With the replacement of standardized tests with portfolios, there would no longer be the need for classes to be made to specifically prepare a student for a test, allowing them to learn relevant info, as opposed to the best answers on a bubble sheet. Arguably, the greatest benefit of the portfolio, however, is its ability to gather more than just a snapshot of a student, so to speak. With the standardized test, its score is only able to determine a student's intelligence on one day of the year and doesn't provide any insight to other important factors such as their work ethic. A student could be ridiculously gifted and look very smart because they came in one day of the year and tried hard on a test and got a good score, but in reality, they've never worked hard a day in their life. This setup does a terrible job preparing kids for the future. Businesses and companies that are looking to employ people out of college are going to care a lot more about how hard an employee is willing to work, not how naturally gifted they are. Sure, being naturally gifted does give you a leg up to your peers, but it really doesn't matter if you're not going to apply it. Unlike the standardized test, a portfolio is able to show you this, however. The portfolio would gather work over the entire course, forcing the student to either put forth an honest effort and learn positive self-motivation skills or ultimately fail. The portfolio would also go a long way with reducing stress in the daily student's life by eliminating high-stakes testing. With some well-structured rubrics, some creativity, and a carefully penned portfolio, supplemented with performance-based assessments that test the student's grasp on knowledge while applying it, could go a long way in improving the quality of education students receive.
Standardized testing is a poor analysis of a student's all-around intelligence, and it affects all of us every day. It has shaped the way we are educated on a daily basis, being pushed through a system just to achieve a number. And now, there are many problems that have arose from this type of testing. For example, types of questions. Nonsense questions, often designed to fool the best of us. Questions like about pineapples and the life moral that they don't have sleeves. Questions with made-up answers, like when an author writes a poem but can't answer a question on a test designed for 10th through 12th graders about her own writing. How are we supposed to understand? They're not good for the average student, not average in intelligence, but average in the way that we all think. Only the most logical and clinical thinkers are prepared to succeed. Those of us who are creative and artistic are often fail because we have to critically analyze problems and questions that have no real answer. These tests don't account for things such as creativity, resilience, motivation, reliability, enthusiasm, and leadership. Things all needed to be successful in today's work field. They cause us to memorize formulas, but not test our ability on how well we can perform in a workplace with others. And there's so much pressure put on these that even the best of us will sometimes fold. We're teaching kids at a young age to freak out, stress, and worry about things in tests that they think will determine their future when they're in an age when they can't even comprehend what these tests will do for their future. And they're inconsistent from state to state. When you get a question that's randomized to prevent cheating, but this kid gets an easier one in California than me, how is that fairly assessing us? But we gave you a creative idea on how to test and show one's true overall worth and allow us to return to the core values of education. We're not going to eliminate testing, no, but we have a new way to evaluate. And like we said, there's no single answer, but multiple assessments is the way to go. Things such as performance-based and portfolios. The performance-based testing our imagination, creativity, resourcefulness, and critical thinking. These pushing us to come up with answers on our own and have to think for ourselves, show we can use our answers in info, not just memorize them. They will show our content knowledge as well as processing skills, work habits, and time management. The performance-based didn't solve it all, but coupled with portfolios can go a long way to solving our problem. We will no longer have to cater our education to these tests. Our work ethic and motivation will be shown. And we'll be able to show a student's drive and willingness to learn over a long period of time. This collection of students' best work shows all things a student is good at, not just a few categories. And their overall body of work allows them to focus their work ethic over a period of time instead of the immense pressure to perform on one day. And it's one thing for students to complain that they want a new way to test when students frankly complain about everything. But what about when the people who are supposed to lead us let the pressure to perform get to them? In 2011, a major cheating scandal was uncovered in Atlanta public schools. 180 employees, including 38 principals, were accused of wrongdoing as a part to cheat and inflate their test scores and exaggerate the achievements of their schools. According to the New York Times, it is obviously not just as, according to the New York Times, this story was from the New York Times, but obviously it's not just the students feeling the exaggerated and fabricated pressure to perform. Investigators from the story wrote that Dr. Hall, the Atlanta Public School superintendent, had created a culture of fear, intimidation, and retaliation. These teachers had a fear because they knew what these students performing badly would do. It would make them look bad and make them lose their jobs. So the question is, how far will we go to be accepted by standardized testing because someone one day decided this is the best way to do it? The problem came when every child was expected to reach an arbitrary standard that didn't include a consideration for where they came from, said State Representative Kathy Ash. We all grow up and learn in different environments, but are tested exactly the same. Now, does that make any sense? People know that test scores are flawed for a variety of reasons, and that it cannot be relied on as the sole primary factor to make high-stakes decisions, said Robert A. Schaefer, the Public Education Director for the National Center for Fair and Open Testing. Now, when our educators and leaders think something is wrong, how are we students supposed to succeed? When a test